So I'm going to make a very short intro this week because I filmed this with myself in the frame and you just really couldn't tell what I was holding, obviously, because these are fairly small. But this week's project is going to be making a set of pipes. These pipes are made out of briar. I still have some more finish to put on them, but these are essentially done, and I'm getting some bigger ferrules where the connection of the mouthpiece meets the actual wood. You could see I had one in my shop from an older pipe just to kind of test it out, but they don't fit perfectly, so I'm going to order those. But pretty self-explanatory project. I carved these two in a similar design, but this one has some texturing on it. And I want to just precursor this video with, I'm not a pipe maker. I know there's very talented artisans that make these pieces. This is basically for a family member. They asked me if I could make them some pipes and are fine with the fact that I'm not an expert pipe maker. But if you wanted to make yourself a set of pipes or even one pipe to smoke, honestly, whatever you want out of it, I am no prude, you can use this video to make something pretty quickly. This was a very simple project. I had these pretty much roughed out and finished in about a day. So like I said, pretty simple. And then next week I think I'm making a case for these. So if I end up doing that, that's probably what the video will entail. So like I said, I'm making these out of briar. I bought these pieces quite a while ago, so I'll try and find the link, but I got the briar off eBay and it was a nice quality briar. I also bought the mouthpieces you see off Amazon, but that's basically what they are. Briar is used because it's naturally water resistant and fire resistant, which is why they make pipes out of it. Other than that, I honestly don't know. I know there's pipe sizing and stem sizing charts and all of that. Like I said, this didn't have to be professionally done. It was more of a leisure pipe. So I mocked up what I wanted out of a piece of sweet gum, which is what that was before. So I did that before I started carving with the briar, and because I'm doing a big dip in these, not as big as this sample I have, but a bigger dip, I'm actually carving them almost like it looks like upside down. It will give me more meat to carve out of it versus flat side. So I had a couple cheaper corncob pipes around the shop, and I measured the openings, the depths of the openings, and then I did a little bit of research online to get the size of the draft hole. My understanding is the draft hole is one of the most important parts. You want it to meet the bottom of the bowl, not up on the side, otherwise you won't get a good draft through the pipe. And also getting a good mortise tenon fit with the mouthpiece is super important. Try and remember to put a link to that website that shows you a lot of stuff about laying out these pipes. So to start, I had to drill a series of all the holes, which to me is the hardest point because it has to be pretty exact. So I'm going to start by drilling the hole, which will be the pipe bowl. I've never worked with briar before, so I started out pre-drilling with a smaller bit because I thought it might be really dense hardwood and I didn't want it to chip off, but it actually wasn't too bad. So I'm going to be doing both of these at the same time, so I started the second one with just drilling the larger hole, and like I said, this is about a 3/4 inch bit. It's going to be the bowl, and I'm going down almost to the bottom of my piece. I came up a 1/2 inch. I didn't explain it before, but this is set at a depth stop, so it's going down about a 1/2 inch from the bottom of the bowl, and then I'm making sure to put those marks on the outside. My biggest fear with carving this was just carving into the bowl or into the 5/32 draft hole, and that would have been kind of a disaster. Once I had that done, I laid out my sample piece I had on there, and then I could cut the angle for the mouthpiece. So you could see I want these to be angled a little bit, so I just laid it on the piece and marked where it would hit. A mark on the top, a mark on the bottom. I connected those two lines, and that gave me my angle. You can see it was just a simple process of laying it out. I did the bigger one as well, which has a little bit of a deeper angle, connected the two pieces. And then I could bring it to the disc sander and just sand right up to that line. You can see I just sanded right up to that line, and that's how the mouthpiece will fit into both of those. I kind of film both pieces a little bit interchangeably, so if you see me doing stuff twice, it's just because I'm carving two at the same time. So then you drill a little bit of a mortise hole to fit the tenon of the mouthpiece in there. You don't want to go too deep like I showed in the graphic earlier. So I actually am a little bit shy of this. I sneak up on it. I found center on the part I just sanded down, and then that is where the hole is going to go. You can see the angle of it sitting in my vise is not perfect, so all I'm going to do is, you see I have the drill bit extended a little bit further down. I could shift that piece until the driplet looks like it's going to go straight through my 2 marks, split my 2 marks in half, and then I could really tighten that piece in the vise and drill that hole. These angles are important, keeping them the way that you want them. And like I said, you could see I didn't go all the way down yet. I do drill it flush later, but for the time being I didn't. Now these are off sizes because they were on Amazon and they were made in China. So if you don't know what size you have, you could use a drill index to find the one. Like this one's a 13/32, which is a bit I don't use in the shop. And I pre-drilled the holes to make sure they fit, because if these holes are too wide, they just won't work. So here is my pieces mounted up. Like I said, you could see I didn't drill all the way to the bottom yet. And then all I did was transfer my mark to the side for the draft hole. So I started with center, but if you see, if I drilled through center, that drill bit would come in pretty high on the bowl. So what I did was I marked my edges, which is that line to the right, and then I marked from the center of the hole down, and where those meet is where the draft hole should be. So you can see I'm laying the drill bit on there. Right there is where it should be. So you're going to drill through the tenon hole here and follow that mark. So same exact thing. I could put it in the vise, angle it till that drill bit is lined up perfectly with my line, and then I could drill through the mouthpiece all the way into the bowl. These holes ended up being fairly accurate. They're a smidgen higher than I would have liked, but honestly, and I'll show this later in the video, the corncob pipes I have, the holes are not anywhere near the bottom, and those work pretty well. You can see the hole goes all the way through because you can see the dust coming out, and that's basically all the holes I have to drill in these, and now I could start carving them. So once again, I'm keeping all my marks on there. I was nervous about hitting any of the holes I had made. So especially as you're carving, you put your finger in there and tell how thick the walls are. You can see on these cheaper pipes I have, they're actually a dowel drilled into the side. They're not a continuous piece. And on this more expensive one I have, you can see the draft hole is exactly in the bottom of the hole. Like I said, mine are fairly close. I'm happy with them. They could be a little bit better, but those corncob pipes, I've smoked out of them before. They work quite well. My cousin that I'm making this for, I doubt is a tobacco connoisseur, so these should work fine. So to get started, I used the disc sander just to kind of start creating my curves. Like I said, I'm keeping my fingers in the bowl a lot to make sure the wall thickness doesn't get too close. And then I'm just putting some marks on there, and I'm basically going to stay away from those marks for the time being. But it's essentially just the marks I had in the beginning, and I'm going to be using some Dremels and some die grinders to carve all this stuff. It's a fairly simple design. I didn't want to make anything too crazy. It has a nice big curve starting from the bottom and arcing all the way up to the bowl, but then it has a rough line that also follows the same curve and kind of a flat portion for your fingers to hold the pipe nicely, and that just creates a nice design. The curves kind of juxtaposed with that sharp arch I made on the side. This is pretty easy work for me at this stage in the game. I have my sample that I fine-tuned before I did this sitting up next to me, so I could just follow the arcs. You can see that's pretty much a rough carving there, and I'm just creating that arc and then smoothing out the inside so that till the hands feel nice, and then smoothing out the front. This is what it looked like after about an hour or two. Put some blue tape on the mouthpiece so I don't hit it with the Dremel, and now I just need to smooth out this upper portion. I don't know all the pipe lingo. I believe this is called the stem. So you can see I'm just smoothing it out again with a flatter Dremel. I have it in the vise. It makes it a little bit easier. I'm just going to cheat up on it. I get close to all my final dimensions, but then I'll hand sand it. Hand sanding is one of those things that takes a long time. It can be really tedious and monotonous, but it's really necessary when you're doing work like this because you could sneak up on all of those marks. You could see, checking to make sure I'm not close to any of those holes. And then I do have a sanding bit for this, which I use first, but then I switch over to sandpaper and some metal files, which really cleaned it up nicely. But like I said, very simple. That one center line really creates a nice design without being too intricate to make. And then the top of this one had a mark in the briar, so I did have to sand down the top of the bowl in order to flatten it all out. And that's basically what that looks like. So like I said, I'm going to be hand sanding it a little bit just to get it perfect. Remove all the high spots. I take this down to about 220, and then I'll start putting finish on it at that point. You can see the metal files really do clean it up. They burnish it a little bit too as well. I'm going to have to polish these up a little bit. Maybe I'll show that in the second video if I end up making that box, because right now they just have plain finish on them. And then I can take the tape off and test piece. This is where I want to put the ferrule in there to kind of hide the fact that it is an angular stem meeting the mouthpiece. But I was pretty happy with the progress so far. And then here's the second one. The second one is going to be a little bit bigger. It'll hold in the hand a little differently. The first one was a little bit smaller. So the nice thing about this is I made that first piece out of the sugar, out of the sweet gum, probably 6 months ago. I just haven't had time to work on this. So I had forgotten how I did it. So now that I did the first one, the second one I did in half the time. I think I had this roughed out in about an hour because I just remembered exactly where I put all of those cuts in order to get what I wanted. Like I said, this one I keep a little bit thicker because it has a deeper swoop to it to match the mouthpiece. You can see that with the Dremel it's really easy. I'm just going through. The Dremel leaves a pretty clean cut. This briar was really nice to carve and work with. It's really nice lumber. And that's kind of the beginning of the roughing out. I'm not going to show all this because I showed the first one. Dremel works one of those things, like I said, I worked on this for about an hour or so, so I'm not going to be able to condense all of that video into one of these. Condense all that footage into one of these videos. It would just take too long. So then for the second one, I want to put a little texturing in it, and that's achieved two main ways in pipe making. One is with a sandblaster, which I don't have, and the other one is a process called rustification. I saw online people were making rustification tools with just some sharpened nails. So that's what I did. I drilled a hole in a scrap piece of maple. I don't even know what that little weird knob handle thing's from. And then I had a piece of conduit that's going to kind of house all the nails to make it a little sturdy. And I just sharpened the ends of some of these. I think they were 16 gauge nails, and then I could sink it all into this little tool and make a very quick, simple rustification tool. You can see I could set them all in place. You want them pretty even. A couple of them sunk on me overnight, but you do want to keep them all even at the top on the same plane. And then this is what it looks like the next day, once all that epoxy has dried. And then what I'm going to do with this one, I'm going to texturize the bottom side of that arc and leave the top side smooth where your hands will touch it. You're basically just twisting this counterclockwise and then clockwise in a repetitive motion to kind of char up the edges, roughen up the edges, and create a texture. I was pretty happy with how this turned out. It looks a lot like the process that you'll see done online. So it was a pretty simple tool in order to achieve that texture, just to make it a little bit different. And then for the coating, I have some Osmo oil in my shop. It's a food grade finish and it's a hard wax finish. So I decided to use it on this. It seems like a lot of people do use some sort of oil on their pieces. I didn't want to use anything too caustic. Since this is a food grade finish, that's probably going to be pretty good. This will get a couple coats. I put it on with a white abrasive pad, put it on pretty thin, and then this is what it looks like after one coat. I didn't get great footage of putting it on this one, but the briar grain really pops on these pieces. And like I said, these will probably get about 3, and that's what they look like after the first coat. So the finish is a little dull at this point. After the third coat, it will be a little shinier.